Series of what Barney referred to as electronic buzzing sounds. Betty referred to them as electric beeping sounds that seemed to be bouncing off the trunk of the car. It caused the vehicle to vibrate, and this tingling, vibrating kind of feeling seemed to pass through their bodies as well.
I was being signaled to stop, and I thought, wonder if there's an accident. I do have my gun, and I'll put my hand on it, and I became afraid if I did think of my gun, I would be harmed. I saw a group of men, and they were standing in the highway, and it was brightly lit up as if it was almost daylight, and they were coming toward me.
They started to come up to the car. They separated. They came up in two groups. And when they started to do that, I got real scared. And the car motor died. The car stalled. And when they started coming up, Barney tried to start the car.
I thought I saw a cluster of 6 men because 3 came to me and 3 did not. I didn't think of the man in the sky in the machine that I saw. I just saw these eyes, and I closed mine, and I got out of the car, and I put my left leg on the ground, and 2 men helped me out, and I did not walk. I felt like I was being supported.
I turn around and I say, Barney, wake up. Barney, why don't you wake up? And he doesn't pay any attention. The object was on the ground.
The object was on the ground?
Yeah. It was the same one I was watching in the sky. There were trees, and there was a path, and there was this clearing. And this object just about filled up this clearing. They're taking me up to the object. Now, I don't want to go on it. I don't know what's going to happen if I go on it. I don't want to go.
I'm afraid to open my eyes because I am being told strongly to keep my eyes closed. Don't open them. I don't want to be operated on.
The man beside me says to go on. He's a little angry with me. He said, oh, go on. The longer you stay out here, the longer it's going to take. You might as well go on and get it over with and get back to your car. We haven't got much time either. Each one takes it on. And I get sort of helpless feeling. There's not much I can do at this point. I go along with them. And I go up the ramp, and there's a corridor to the left. And there's a room. I'm standing in the doorway, and I turn around, waiting for them to bring Barney in. But they don't do this. They lead Barney right past where I'm standing. I said, what are you doing with Barney? Bring him in here where I am. And the man says, no, we only got equipment enough in one room to do one person at a time. If we took you both in the same room, it would take too long. The doctor, the examiner, says he wants to do some tests. He wants to check my nervous system. He wants to find out how my nerves and his nerves are different. I don't know how our nervous system, but I hope we'll never have nerve enough to go around kidnapping people right off the highways like he's done. He tells me to take off my dress, and the examiner unzips my dress. I lie down on the table on my back, and he brings over this. They're like needles. There's a whole cluster of needles, and each needle has a wire running from it. I don't know. There's some kind of a gadget on the end of these needles. Like a TV picture screen, you know how when the picture isn't on, you get all kinds of lines, something like that. But they touch me with the needles. I just feel a needle touching. That doesn't hurt at all. It's some kind of a record they're making. I don't know just what it is. Then they roll me over on my back, and the examiner has a long needle in his hand. It's bigger than any needle I've ever seen. I asked him what he's going to do with it. I asked the leader, I said, why did he stick the needle in my navel? And he said it was a pregnancy test. And I said, that was no pregnancy test here.
This interview went on rather smoothly until the areas of fear in the latter part of the sighting of the flying object, when she began to show very marked disturbance, where tears were running down her cheeks. The same occurred with very marked agitation during the procedure that appeared to be taking place in the strange object, the apparent medical examination. Tears were running down Mrs. Hill's cheeks. Her nose was running. It was felt best to stop, even though she was still in the, quote, operating room, unquote, because of the degree of agitation.
Go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that going along with this compelling pieces of hypnosis, which we're going to hear more on the next half hour, at my news website, earthfiles.com, you can see very vivid and compelling illustrations of the beings that were interacting, drawn by artist David Baker back in 1964 in association with the hypnosis sessions, and very powerful oil paintings done more recently by Patrick Richard of New Mexico, based on the earlier work in 64 and with discussions with Kathleen Marden. And you and the Coast listeners, it would help you to get a sense of the context if you go to Earth Files. It's 2 parts, and the illustrations are really quite amazing. I had never seen them before working with Kathleen.
I got to tell you, Linda, this is, you've brought us some incredible stories over the years, but this is riveting to hear Barney and Betty Hill talking about an episode that has driven both of us into what we've been trying to do all these years, and that's to uncover whether we've been visited or not. I mean, I remember as a kid, my mother bringing me home this Look magazine saying, George, you've got to read this, because she was into all this.
Right.
And the fact that I am hearing them now. You know, I talked to Benjamin Simon, but I never had a chance to interview Barney and Betty Hill. To hear their voices, it's really chilling, Linda.
I know, and I had never heard them either before now, and that's why I thought it would be so important to share on Coast and at Earth Files.
All right, Linda, stay with us. You've got another half hour to go with this incredible story, and then next hour, it's Conversations with Linda. We'll take your calls. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. I'm George Norrie with Linda Moulton Howe, who is bringing us incredible audio of an event that took place in 1961, the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case. Go ahead, Linda, on with your story.
Thanks, George. Well, Kathleen Marden, who is Betty Hill's niece, told me recently that Betty and Barney never wanted their UFO encounter to be made public. Her aunt, Betty Hill, was a social worker for the state of New Hampshire. Barney was employed by the Portsmouth, New Hampshire post office, but he was also very involved in the civil rights movement. He was a civil rights leader, and there is an archival collection about his political leadership at the University of New Hampshire in the Milne Special Collection Library. Betty and Barney Hill were invited guests at Lyndon B. Johnson's presidential inauguration. Betty and Barney were also involved with the Office of Economic Opportunity in founding the Rockingham County Community Action Program in New Hampshire, and Barney was the first executive director of that program. Kathleen told me that when a Boston Herald traveler reporter named John Luttrell first approached Betty and Barney in August of 1965 and wanted to interview them, they refused. And they had been living with all of this for nearly 5 years before any of this started to break. And when they realized that this reporter might go ahead anyway and do a newspaper article on them and their experience, they even contacted 2 separate lawyers to try to prevent this reporter from writing an article and publishing it. They were afraid it would have a negative impact on not only their reputations, but on their